She sat in her aging sedan, hands clutching the steering wheel. Martha Thomas had spent weeks selecting the perfect outfit, a modest blue dress with lace trim that had cost 3 months of saving. From her parking spot across from the towering cathedral, she watched as limousines deposited guests in designer suits and flowing gowns. Then came the bridal car. As Julia stepped out, Martha's breath caught. Her daughter looked beautiful but vacant, like a porcelain doll. When security guards spotted Martha's car and began approaching, she placed a small gift box on the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove away without protest. A single tear rolled down her cheek. This is the story of a mother's silent departure, a daughter's golden cage, and the unbreakable bond that would ultimately save them both. Martha Thomas had never intended to be a single mother. When she married Frank at 23, she envisioned a partnership that would last forever. She still remembered the day she told him she was pregnant. His brown eyes had lit up, and he'd swung her around their tiny apartment kitchen, promising to be the best father a child could want. For the first 7 years, he kept that promise. Frank would come home from his construction job with small treasures for Julia, a pretty rock, a wildflower, once even a tiny kitten they named Whiskers. Martha would watch from the kitchen doorway as Frank and Julia played board games on the living room floor, Julia's laughter filling their modest home like music. Then came the layoffs. Frank's construction company downsized, and suddenly, the man who had always prided himself on providing for his family couldn't find work. The rejection letters piled up, and with them, Frank's drinking increased. Martha picked up extra shifts to cover the bills, but each time she came home exhausted, she'd find Frank on the couch, empty bottles at his feet, the light in his eyes dimmer than the day before. "I'm sorry," he'd say. "I'll try harder tomorrow." But tomorrow became next week, next month, until one morning, Martha woke to find his side of the bed empty, his clothes gone from the dresser, his wedding ring left on the kitchen table with a note, "You both deserve better." No goodbye to Julia, no forwarding address, just gone. Julia was inconsolable for weeks. She'd sit by the window every evening, waiting for her father's truck to pull into the driveway. "When is Daddy coming home?" she'd ask night after night. Martha would hold her close, rocking her gently. "I don't know, sweetheart," was all she could say, because how do you tell a 7-year-old child that her father had abandoned them? That was when Martha started working 3 jobs. The mortgage was in her name, and she was determined not to lose their home, the only stability Julia had left. Mornings at the school cafeteria meant she could see Julia during lunch, slipping her an extra cookie when no one was looking. Evenings cleaning office buildings meant leaving Julia with Mrs. Henderson next door, an elderly widow who taught Julia to knit while Martha vacuumed corporate hallways until midnight. Weekends as a home health aide for elderly patients meant bringing Julia along, where the old folks doted on her while Martha changed bedding and administered medications. "You're working too hard," Mrs. Henderson would say, concerned as Martha picked up Julia, dark circles under her eyes. "I'm doing what needs to be done," Martha would reply with a tired smile. Julia's college fund won't fill itself, because that was Martha's dream for her daughter: education, opportunity, a life without the constant struggle that defined Martha's existence. Julia would go to college, have a career, marry someone who would never abandon her. Martha would make sure of it, even if it broke her in the process. The years passed in a blur of work, sleep, repeat. Julia grew from a heartbroken child into a serious teenager who understood early the value of hard work. She studied late into the night, determined to earn scholarships, to ease her mother's burden. "Mom, you don't have to keep the weekend job," 16-year-old Julia had insisted one Sunday as Martha rubbed ointment into her cracked hands. "I can get a part-time job after school." Martha had shaken her head firmly. "Your job is to study, to get into a good college. That's how you'll help me." When the acceptance letter from State University arrived with a partial scholarship, Martha had cried for the first time since Frank left. They'd sat at their small kitchen table, Martha's work-worn hands holding Julia's young, smooth ones. "We did it," Martha had whispered. "No, Mom, you did it," Julia had corrected, tears in her eyes. College changed Julia. She bloomed from a serious, studious girl into a confident young woman. She joined the marketing club, made friends with people from backgrounds far more privileged than hers, learned to navigate social situations Martha had never experienced. When she'd come home for holidays, Martha noticed subtle changes. Her speech was different, more polished, her clothes more expensive looking, though Martha knew they came from thrift stores, her tastes more refined. Martha was proud, if sometimes bewildered by the transformation. This was what she'd wanted, after all, for Julia to rise beyond their circumstances. But sometimes, watching Julia sip tea with her pinky slightly raised, Martha would feel a pang of something like loss. Her daughter was becoming someone she didn't fully recognize. 4 years later, Martha sat in the back row of the university auditorium, watching Julia walk across the stage to receive her diploma, a marketing degree, with honors. Martha wore her best dress, a navy blue number she'd found at Goodwill, and carefully altered. Her hands, rough and reddened from years of cleaning chemicals, clapped until they stung as Julia accepted her diploma. That night, over a celebration dinner Martha had saved 6 months for, Julia shared her news. "Mom, I got a job offer from Livingston Marketing in the city." Martha's fork paused midway to her mouth. "The city? That's 3 hours away." Julia nodded, excitement radiating from her face. "The starting salary is amazing. I can finally help you, Mom. I can send money home every month. You can cut back on work, maybe even just keep the school job." Martha's throat tightened. Of course, Julia would move away. That was the natural order of things. Children grew up, built their own lives. It's what she'd sacrificed for, after all. "I'm so proud of you," Martha said, reaching across to squeeze Julia's hand. She didn't mention the sudden emptiness she felt at the thought of returning to their small house alone. Julia moved to the city a month later. True to her word, she sent money home monthly, but Martha banked it all. "For your future," she'd say when Julia asked why she wouldn't use it to ease her workload. The truth was, Martha didn't know how to slow down anymore. Work had defined her existence for so long that the thought of free time terrified her. What would she do with herself? 2 years passed. Julia's calls became less frequent as she climbed the corporate ladder. When they did speak, Julia would talk excitedly about campaigns she was working on, colleagues she admired, the pulse of city life. Martha would listen, offering encouraging words while struggling to understand this world so different from her own. Then came the call that changed everything. "Mom," Julia's voice trembled with excitement over the phone. "I met someone. His name was Connor Wilson. He was 32. A Harvard Business School graduate, and the heir to Wilson Pharmaceuticals, a company worth billions. They'd met at a charity gala where Julia was representing her marketing firm. "He's amazing, Mom," Julia gushed. "So intelligent and accomplished, and he could have talked to anyone there, but he spent the whole night with me." Martha listened, happiness for her daughter mingling with an inexplicable unease. "He sounds wonderful, sweetheart. When do I get to meet him?" There was a slight pause. "Soon," Julia promised. "He's very busy with the company, but soon." Soon stretched into months. Julia would call with updates about their relationship, weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, Broadway shows, dinners at restaurants Martha couldn't pronounce the names of. But each time Martha suggested visiting the city or having them come to her home, Julia would find a reason why now wasn't a good time. Until the day Julia called to say they were engaged. "He proposed last night, Mom, at Le Cirque with a string quartet playing our song." Martha swallowed her hurt at not having met the man who would become her son-in-law. "That sounds beautiful, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you." "The ring is incredible," Julia continued. 5 carats, Mom. I'm almost embarrassed to wear it. It's so large." Martha thought of her own simple gold band, long since pawned to cover one of Julia's college textbook bills. "When's the wedding? I should request time off work." Another pause, longer this time. "Well, that's the thing. The Wilsons have a family tradition of large, formal weddings. Connor's mother has already started planning. It's going to be at St. Michael's Cathedral. Black tie." Martha felt her stomach sink. "That sounds fancy." "It is. And Mom?" Julia's voice dropped slightly. "Connor's family. They're very particular about appearances. Very old money. Very traditional." Martha understood immediately what wasn't being said. She, with her cafeteria, hairnet, and cleaning uniform, would not fit into this world of old money and tradition. "I see," she said quietly. "I love you, Mom," Julia rushed to add. "It's just, his mother Faith can be difficult. She's already asking so many questions about my background." "And what have you told her?" Martha asked, dreading the answer. "The truth," Julia insisted. "That you raised me alone, that you worked hard to put me through college. She just has certain expectations about the kind of family Connor should marry into." Martha closed her eyes, feeling a familiar ache, the ache of being deemed not enough. "Julia, I would never embarrass you. I know that, Mom. It's not me. It's them. They're just different from us." 3 weeks later, the wedding invitation arrived. Thick cream cardstock with gold embossing, announcing the union of Julia Ann Thomas and Connor Elliott Wilson at St. Michael's Cathedral, followed by a reception at the Wilson estate. Tucked inside was a handwritten note from Julia. "Mom, I can't wait to share my special day with you. Would you mind sitting toward the back of the church? Connor's mother is concerned about balancing family representation in the photographs. Love you so much." Julia Martha stared at the note for a long time, her finger tracing the elegant handwriting that looked nothing like the childish scrawl that had once adorned Mother's Day cards. She thought of the countless nights she'd gone to bed hungry so Julia could have a full stomach. The winters spent with the thermostat turned low to save on heating bills, both of them bundled under blankets to keep warm. The shoes she'd worn until they had holes, patching them with duct tape because Julia needed new school supplies. For the first time, Martha allowed herself to feel anger. Not at Julia, never at her daughter, who had only ever wanted to succeed in a world that judged people by their pedigree and polish. but at a system that could make a woman like Martha, who had given everything for her child, feel like she should be hidden away, ashamed of her existence. The next day, Martha called Julia. "Hi, Mom," Julia answered, sounding distracted. "Can I call you back? I'm in the middle of cake tastings with Faith." "This will just take a minute," Martha said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I got the invitation. And your note." A beat of silence. "Oh, right. Look, Mom, I know it's not ideal, but—" "Julia," Martha interrupted gently. "I just want to understand. Am I an embarrassment to you now?" "No," Julia exclaimed. "God, no, Mom. Never. It's just, Faith is handling all the arrangements, and she has very specific ideas about how everything should look. The photographer will be taking formal family portraits, and she thinks it would be unbalanced, with just you on my side, and their extended family on Connor's." Martha closed her eyes, absorbing the pain. "I see. Please understand," Julia pleaded. "This is important for Connor's family. The governor will be there, Mom, senators, people who can influence Wilson Pharmaceuticals' business. And a cafeteria worker doesn't quite fit the guest list," Martha finished for her. "That's not fair," Julia said, but her voice lacked conviction. Martha took a deep breath. "I'll sit wherever you need me to, Julia. I just want you to be happy." "Thank you, Mom. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. Always." 2 weeks before the wedding, Martha received an unexpected visitor. Actually, 2 visitors. She had just returned from her evening cleaning job when a sleek black car pulled up outside her modest home. From it emerged a tall, handsome man in an expensive suit, and beside him, an elegant older woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair. Martha recognized Connor immediately from the photos Julia had shared. This must be his mother, Faith Wilson, beside him. Martha suddenly wished she wasn't wearing her cleaning uniform, that her house didn't have peeling paint, that she was somehow more. "Mrs. Thomas?" Connor extended his hand, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I'm Connor Wilson. This is my mother, Faith." Martha shook his hand, then Faith's, noticing how the older woman seemed to barely touch her fingers before withdrawing. "Please, come in. I wasn't expecting visitors, so excuse the mess." There was no mess. Martha kept her small home meticulously clean, but the instinct to apologize for her circumstances was automatic. They followed her inside, Faith glancing around with poorly disguised disdain. "What a cozy little place," she remarked, making cozy sound like a disease. "Can I offer you some coffee? Tea?" Martha asked, uncomfortable in her own home for the first time she could remember. "No, thank you," Faith replied crisply. "We won't be staying long." Martha noticed a third figure entering her living room, Julia. Her daughter looked beautiful in an expensive cream dress, but there was something different about her, a tightness around her eyes, a stiffness in her posture that Martha had never seen before. "Mom," Julia said, her voice oddly formal, "I'm sorry we didn't call first. Connor and Faith wanted to speak with you directly." Martha looked between the three of them, sensing the weight of an unspoken agenda. "About what?" Connor cleared his throat, taking charge with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. "Mrs. Thomas, we have a situation regarding the wedding, a matter of appearances." Martha felt her spine stiffen. "I already told Julia I'd sit in the back, if that's what this is about." Faith stepped forward, pearl necklace gleaming against her cashmere sweater. "Actually, Mrs. Thomas, we're hoping for a bit more discretion than that." "Mother," Connor warned softly, but Faith continued. "The Wilson name carries significant weight in our community. The guest list includes the governor, 3 senators, and the CEOs of the country's largest pharmaceutical distributors. The wedding has already garnered attention from society publications." She paused, selecting her next words carefully. "We feel your presence might be distracting." Martha looked at Julia, waiting for her daughter to defend her, to express outrage at the suggestion. Julia said nothing, her eyes fixed on the worn carpet. "You're asking me not to attend my only daughter's wedding?" Martha asked, struggling to keep her voice even. Connor stepped in, his tone businesslike. "What we're proposing is a compromise. Wilson Pharmaceuticals is providing Julia and me with a substantial wedding gift, a house in Westchester, fully paid for, and a position for Julia in our corporate marketing department." He paused. "These gifts are contingent on a wedding that reflects the Wilson family standards." "You're buying my absence," Martha translated, the realization like ice in her veins. "We're ensuring Julia's future," Faith corrected, "a future that frankly would not be available to her otherwise." Martha looked again at Julia, who still wouldn't meet her eyes. It was then that Martha noticed something that made her blood run cold, a bruise, partially visible on Julia's wrist, which her daughter quickly covered by pulling down her sleeve when she saw Martha's gaze. In that moment, Martha understood that something far worse than social climbing was happening. Julia wasn't just marrying into wealth, she was being isolated, controlled. "Julia," Martha said softly, "is this what you want?" Before Julia could answer, Connor placed his hand on Julia's shoulder, his fingers digging in slightly. Julia understands what's best for her future, for our future together. Julia finally looked up, her eyes swimming with tears she wouldn't let fall. It's just one day, Mom, and we can have our own celebration later, just us. Martha felt her heart breaking, but also a fierce protective instinct rising. Making a scene now, demanding to be included, might push Julia further away, further into Connor's control. Sometimes silence was the wiser choice. All right, Martha said quietly, if that's what you both want. Relief washed over Faith's face, quickly masked by a practiced smile. Wonderful. I'm glad we could reach an understanding. She reached into her designer handbag and withdrew an envelope. This is a small token of our appreciation for your cooperation. Martha didn't touch the envelope. I don't want your money. Don't be proud, Mrs. Thomas, Faith said with a cold smile. Everyone has their price. Not me, Martha replied, her dignity the one thing she refused to surrender. And not my attendance at my daughter's wedding. That should have been my right, not something to be negotiated away. I'm agreeing for Julia's sake, not yours. Connor's jaw tightened at her defiance, and Martha saw a flash of something dangerous in his eyes. She recognized it instantly, the same look Frank would get before his temper exploded. Martha glanced again at Julia's wrist and made her decision. She would step back, but she wouldn't go far. Julia might need her, sooner than any of them realized. After they left, Martha sat alone in her quiet house, surrounded by photos of Julia growing up, Julia losing her first tooth, Julia on her first bicycle, Julia in her graduation cap and gown. In every image, Martha saw the same bright, determined eyes that had been dull and fearful today. I'll always be here, Martha whispered to the photographs. When you need me, I'll be waiting. On the morning of Julia's wedding, Martha woke before dawn. She moved through her quiet house with purpose, selecting the blue dress she'd bought months ago when she still believed she'd be sitting proudly in the front row. She styled her graying hair carefully, applied modest makeup, and fastened her mother's simple pearl earrings, the only heirloom she had to pass down. Though she'd agreed not to attend the ceremony, Martha couldn't bear to be completely absent from her daughter's most important day. She would respect the Wilsons' wishes and stay out of sight, but she needed to be near, to send her love to Julia, even if from a distance. Martha drove to St. Michael's Cathedral, parking her aging car across the street. From this vantage point, she could see the grand entrance where guests would arrive. She was early. The ceremony wouldn't begin for 2 hours, but already, staff were arranging flower displays and rolling out a white carpet. As time passed, limousines and luxury cars began arriving. Women in designer dresses and men in impeccable tuxedos ascended the cathedral steps. Martha recognized some faces from television, a famous senator, the governor, celebrities whose names she couldn't recall. This was Julia's world now, or at least the world she was marrying into. A world Martha could observe but never join. You gave her wings, Martha whispered to herself. This is what you worked for. But even as she tried to convince herself, Martha couldn't shake the memory of Julia's bruised wrist, her downcast eyes in Martha's living room. This wasn't the confident, vibrant daughter she'd raised. This was someone being molded to fit another's expectations, someone whose light was dimming. At precisely 11:30, a stretch limousine with white ribbons pulled up to the cathedral. Martha's heart leaped into her throat. The driver opened the door, and there was Julia, a vision in white lace and satin. Her dress was clearly expensive, her hair arranged in an elaborate updo adorned with tiny diamonds that caught the sunlight. But it was Julia's face that made Martha's chest ache. Behind the professional makeup, her daughter looked hollow. Her smile was fixed, her movements mechanical as Connor's father escorted her toward the cathedral entrance, a man she'd never met stepping into the role that should have been Martha's. "Oh, Julia," Martha breathed, a tear slipping down her cheek. Martha had brought something with her, a small velvet box containing a silver locket that had belonged to her grandmother. Inside, she'd placed a tiny photo of herself and Julia, taken on Julia's high school graduation day, both of them smiling, full of hope for the future. Along with it, Martha had written a note. "My dearest Julia, today you begin a new chapter, and while I cannot be beside you, my heart walks with you down that aisle. Remember who you are, my brave, brilliant girl who deserves only joy and kindness. If you ever need me, for anything, I will be there in an instant. Love is not control or conditions. Love is freedom and support and unwavering presence. I love you that way, always, Mom." Martha had planned to find a way to deliver this gift, perhaps through a sympathetic staff member, but as she watched the cathedral doors close behind Julia, she noticed movement near her car. 2 men in dark suits with earpieces, private security, were approaching, scanning the area with practiced efficiency. One pointed toward Martha's car. They had been instructed to watch for her, she realized. To ensure she didn't disrupt the Wilson family's perfect day, Martha made a quick decision. Starting her car, She pulled away from the curb before they reached her. She would not create a scene that might embarrass Julia. Instead, she drove to the Wilson estate, where the reception would be held, found an inconspicuous side entrance used by delivery vehicles, and approached a young woman unloading flowers. "Excuse me," Martha said gently. "I have a gift for the bride. It's very important to her." The florist looked sympathetic. "I'm not supposed to." "Please," Martha said, her eyes conveying what words couldn't. "I'm her mother." The young woman's expression softened. She glanced around, then quickly took the small box. "I'll make sure she gets it." "Thank you," Martha whispered, relief washing over her. It wasn't much, but it was a thread, a connection to her daughter when everything else had been severed. Martha drove home, changed out of her blue dress, and spent the evening looking through old photo albums. She wondered if Julia had received her gift, if the words had reached her heart. Most of all, she wondered if her daughter was truly happy, or if she'd traded her freedom for a gilded cage. Days passed without word from Julia. Then, weeks. Martha called several times, but her calls went to voicemail. She left messages, casual, loving, free of accusation. "Just checking in, sweetheart. Hope the honeymoon was wonderful. Love you. Call when you can." Finally, a month after the wedding, Julia called. "Mom," she said, her voice oddly formal. "I'm sorry I haven't been in touch. It's been so busy with the move and everything." "It's all right, sweetheart. How are you? How's married life?" A pause. "It's adjustment. Connor's family has a lot of expectations. Did you get my gift? The locket?" Another pause, longer this time. "Yes, it was. It was beautiful, Mom. Thank you." Julia's voice cracked slightly. "I keep it in my jewelry box, not around her neck," Martha noted. "I meant what I wrote, Julia. If you need anything, I should go." Julia interrupted quickly. "Connor will be home soon, and I need to make sure dinner is ready." Martha frowned. Julia had never cooked more than microwave meals in her apartment. "You're cooking now?" "Faith arranged for lessons," Julia explained. "Connor prefers home-cooked meals to restaurants on weeknights." Something in her tone sent a chill through Martha. "Julia, are you happy?" The line went silent for so long that Martha thought they'd been disconnected. Then, in a voice so soft Martha almost missed it, Julia whispered, "I have to be." Before Martha could respond, she heard a door open in the background. "I have to go," Julia said quickly, her voice instantly brighter, artificial. "Love you, Mom. I'll call soon." The line went dead, leaving Martha staring at the phone, her concern deepening into fear. Over the next several months, Julia's calls came infrequently and always followed the same pattern. She'd call when Connor was out, speak briefly about surface topics, the house, social events, charity committees. Faith had insisted she join, and end the call abruptly if Connor returned. Martha began to notice other changes too. Julia's once confident voice grew hesitant, checking her words as if afraid of saying the wrong thing. She never called from her cell phone anymore, only the house line, suggesting Connor might be monitoring her mobile. 6 months after the wedding, Martha received an unexpected call from an unknown number. "Mrs. Thomas?" a woman's voice asked. "You don't know me, but I'm Alexis, Julia's friend from her marketing firm." Martha clutched the phone tighter. "Is Julia all right?" "I'm worried about her," Alexis admitted. "We used to have lunch every week, but since the wedding I've barely seen her. When I do, she's different. Connor always accompanies her. She's lost weight, she's withdrawn, and she dropped her phone when it rang last week, literally jumped like she was terrified." Martha closed her eyes, her worst fears confirmed. "Have you tried talking to her about it?" "Connor doesn't let her be alone with anyone for long," Alexis explained, "and she gets nervous if I ask too many questions. But yesterday, she slipped me this note with your number. It just said, 'Call Martha, tell her I'm fine.' That's when I knew she wasn't fine at all." Martha made a decision. "Thank you for calling, Alexis. I'm going to visit my daughter." The next day, Martha drove to Westchester, to the address she'd found for the Wilsons' new home. It was a mansion set behind wrought iron gates with a security keypad. Martha pulled up and pressed the intercom button. "Wilson residence," a formal voice answered. "This is Martha Thomas, Julia Wilson's mother. I'd like to see my daughter." A long pause. "One moment, please." Martha waited, heart pounding. 5 minutes passed before the intercom crackled to life again. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson isn't available. Would you like to leave a message?" "Tell her I'm here, and I'm not leaving until I see her," Martha said firmly. Another wait, longer this time. Then the gates began to slide open. Martha drove through, approaching a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine, all stone and columns and perfect landscaping. Before she could reach the front door, it opened, and Connor stepped out. "Mrs. Thomas," he greeted her, his smile practiced but his eyes cold. "This is an unexpected visit. I want to see Julia," Martha said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I'm afraid Julia isn't feeling well today. Morning sickness." His smile widened. "We were going to call you next week with the news. You're going to be a grandmother." Martha's heart dropped. A baby. Julia was pregnant, which would tie her even more tightly to this controlling family. "Congratulations," she managed. "But I'd still like to see her. As I said, she's resting. Doctor's orders. We're being very careful with this pregnancy." "Then I'll wait," Martha insisted. Connor's facade of politeness slipped for an instant, revealing irritation. "That won't be necessary. I'll have her call you when she's feeling better." "Connor?" Julia's voice came from inside the house. "Who is it?" Before Connor could answer, Julia appeared in the doorway. Martha barely recognized her daughter. Julia had indeed lost weight, her collarbones protruding beneath her silk blouse. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, but her eyes, the eyes that had once sparkled with ambition and joy, were dull. "Mom?" Julia looked startled, then glanced quickly at Connor, as if seeking permission. "I didn't know you were coming. I tried calling," Martha said, moving toward her daughter. "I was worried." Connor smoothly stepped between them. "Julia needs to rest. The doctor was very clear about minimizing stress during the first trimester." Julia nodded obediently. "He's right, Mom. I was just feeling dizzy and came down for some water." Martha noticed how Julia's hand instinctively went to her stomach, a protective gesture, but also one that conveyed fear. "Can I at least hug my daughter?" Martha asked, eyes locked with Connor's. After a moment of consideration, Connor stepped aside, allowing Martha to embrace Julia. Martha held her daughter close, feeling how fragile she'd become. "Are you really okay?" Martha whispered. Julia nodded against her shoulder, but Martha felt a tremor run through her daughter's body. As they separated, Julia slipped something into Martha's hand, a small folded piece of paper. "I should go lie down," Julia said loudly for Connor's benefit. "I'll call you soon, Mom, to talk about the baby." Connor placed his hand possessively on Julia's back. "I'll make sure she does. Now, if you'll excuse us, Mrs. Thomas." Martha had no choice but to leave. Once in her car, safely past the gates, she unfolded the paper Julia had pressed into her palm. In shaky handwriting, it read, "They're watching everything. The pills they're giving me, not normal prenatal vitamins. Don't trust them." Martha's blood ran cold. She immediately thought of Wilson Pharmaceuticals and remembered something she'd read months ago, a small news item about the company facing scrutiny over experimental drugs that hadn't gone through proper approval channels. The story had disappeared quickly from the news cycle, presumably buried by the Wilsons' influence. Now her daughter was pregnant and being given unknown medications. Martha knew she needed to act, but also that she needed to be smart. If she confronted the Wilsons directly, they would simply cut off her access to Julia completely. She needed allies, information, and a plan. That evening, Martha made a call to an old friend, Angela Rivera, a woman she'd met years ago when cleaning the downtown police precinct offices. Angela had been a rookie cop then, but now she was a detective with the county sheriff's department. "Martha? It's been ages." Angela greeted her warmly. "Angela, I need your help," Martha said. "It's about my daughter. I think she's in trouble." Life inside the Wilson mansion was nothing like Julia had imagined during their whirlwind courtship. The first changes had been subtle, Connor suggesting she quit her marketing job because Wilson women don't work outside the home, Faith scheduling Julia's days with charity committees, tennis lessons, and hostess training. Then came the more restrictive measures, Connor expressing concern about her friends from work, particularly Alexis, whom he called a bad influence. His insistence on driving Julia everywhere because the Westchester roads were dangerous for an inexperienced driver, though Julia had been driving since she was 16. Her cell phone had been the next casualty. One evening, after Julia spent an hour talking with her old college roommate, Connor had taken her phone to upgrade it. When he returned it, all her contacts were gone except for his number, Faith's, and the house staff. Her social media accounts had been deleted, for security reasons, he claimed. There are people who target wealthy families. When Julia attempted to recreate her accounts, she discovered the passwords had been changed. The mansion itself became her beautiful prison. Security cameras monitored every entrance. The gates required a code that changed weekly, a code Connor never shared with Julia. Staff reported her movements to Connor. If she spent too long on a phone call, took an unexpected walk around the grounds, or received an unscheduled visitor, Connor would know within minutes. In those early months, Julia had tried to convince herself this was normal for people of the Wilson social standing, that Connor's controlling behavior was simply protectiveness, that his occasional outbursts of anger, like when he'd gripped her wrist so hard it bruised after she'd laughed too loudly at a dinner party, were stress from his work. The pregnancy had changed everything. Now Connor and Faith monitored not just her movements but her body itself. "These are special prenatal supplements," Faith had explained, watching Julia swallow the unmarked pills each morning. "Wilson Pharmaceuticals' newest formula. They're not on the market yet, but they've shown remarkable results in trials." What Faith didn't know was that Julia had noticed her mother-in-law standing outside her bathroom door after each dose, listening to ensure Julia didn't spit out the medication. One morning, Julia had pretended to take the pills but slipped them under her tongue, later flushing them down the toilet. That evening, at dinner, her water had tasted strange, slightly bitter. When she'd excused herself feeling dizzy, she'd overheard Connor and Faith in Connor's study. She didn't take the morning dose, Faith was saying. The blood test showed no trace of the compound. I handled it, Connor replied. Put it in her water. Double dose. She can't be allowed to compromise the trial, Mother. Not with everything at stake. Are you sure she's the right candidate? She's becoming resistant. Her genetic profile is perfect, Connor insisted. And now that she's pregnant, we have the ideal testing scenario. The board is expecting results by the 3rd trimester. And if there are complications, like with Elaine, there was a pause before Connor responded. Then we'll have learned valuable data either way. That's how science progresses, Mother. Julia had retreated to her bedroom, shaking. Elaine, Connor's first wife, who had died during childbirth 3 years ago. A tragedy, Connor had told her. Unforeseeable complications. Now Julia understood. She wasn't just Connor's wife. She was a test subject. After that night, Julia became more careful. She learned to hide the pills under her tongue, to pretend to swallow water that she later spit out when alone. She knew the risk was enormous. Whatever they were giving her could be affecting her baby, but the alternative seemed worse. Being fully drugged with whatever experimental compound they were testing might be even more dangerous for her child. With her phone monitored and her movements tracked, Julia had few options for reaching out for help. Her only privacy came during her weekly prenatal checkups with Dr. Evans, Wilson Pharmaceuticals' chief medical researcher. Even then, a nurse, one of Faith's longtime employees, was always present. During her 5th month of pregnancy, Julia spotted a familiar face at one of Faith's charity luncheons. Alexis, her former colleague, now working for the catering company. While Faith was distracted greeting guests, Julia managed to slip into the kitchen. "Alexis," she whispered urgently, "what are you doing here?" Alexis looked around carefully before answering. "I've been taking catering gigs, hoping to run into you. Your mom is worried sick." "You've spoken to my mother?" Hope flared in Julia's chest. Alexis nodded. "She asked me to look for an opportunity to contact you." "Julia, what's going on? You look—" "I need help," Julia interrupted, aware that time was short. "They're giving me drugs, experimental drugs. I think they want to use my baby for some kind of trial." Alexis's eyes widened. "My God, you need to get out of here." "I can't. The security, the cameras." Julia glanced nervously toward the door. "Connor watches everything. Is there anything I can give your mom? Any message?" Julia thought quickly. She reached for the silver locket she kept hidden in her pocket, the one her mother had given her on her wedding day. She'd never dared wear it openly, knowing Connor would confiscate anything connecting her to her old life. Inside was the photo of her and Martha at graduation. "Give her this." Julia pressed the locket into Alexis's hand. "And tell her the blue house. Remember, she'll understand." Just then, the kitchen door swung open. Faith stood there, eyes narrowing at the sight of Julia with a caterer. "Julia, darling, we're about to begin lunch," Faith said smoothly, though her gaze was sharp. "Your place is at the head table, not in the kitchen." Julia plastered on a smile. "Of course, I was just complimenting the staff on the beautiful canapes." As Faith escorted her back to the dining room, arm linked firmly through Julia's, she murmured, "I don't think we'll be using this catering company again. The staff seems unprofessional." Julia felt a chill. She prayed Alexis would escape before anyone could question her, that the locket would reach her mother, that Martha would remember their special code from so long ago. That evening, Julia paid the price for her kitchen conversation. Connor was waiting in their bedroom, his expression thunderous. "Making friends with the help?" he asked, voice deceptively calm as he loosened his tie. "Mother mentioned you spent quite some time chatting with a caterer today." Julia kept her face neutral, just being polite. "Really?" "Because Mother thought the woman looked familiar, like she might have been one of your former colleagues." Julia felt her heart rate accelerate but forced herself to sound casual. "I didn't notice. I talked to so many people at these functions." Connor approached her slowly, his height allowing him to tower over her. "You know what I find interesting? Security footage showed that same woman lingering outside the gates last month, almost as if she was surveilling our home." Julia hadn't known this. Had Alexis been trying to contact her before? Or had her mother sent her to check on Julia? "I wouldn't know anything about that," Julia said, moving toward the bathroom, desperate to create space between them. Connor grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her skin. "Don't lie to me, Julia. What did you give her?" "Nothing," Julia gasped. "I swear." His grip tightened. "Let me see your pockets." Julia froze. The locket was gone, safely with Alexis, but her reaction had given her away. Connor's face darkened. "Empty them, now." With trembling hands, Julia turned out her pockets. "Nothing." "Where is it?" Connor demanded. "That cheap locket your mother gave you. The one you think I don't know about." Julia stared at him, shocked. He'd known all along. "You're hurting me," she whispered, glancing down at his hand on her arm. "Please, think of the baby." At the mention of their child, Connor's grip loosened slightly, but his expression remained hard. "You've been making things very difficult, Julia. The missed doses, the secretive behavior. Do you have any idea what's at stake here?" "Tell me," Julia said, seizing the opportunity to learn more. "What exactly is in those pills you're giving me?" Connor's laugh was cold. "You wouldn't understand the science, but I can tell you this. Wilson Pharmaceuticals is on the verge of a breakthrough that will revolutionize prenatal care. A compound that ensures perfect fetal development, prevents genetic abnormalities, enhances cognitive potential. Has it been approved? Tested properly?" "That's what you are, darling," Connor said with a chilling smile. "Part of our most promising test group. Your genetic profile matches perfectly with mine. Our child will be the proof the board needs to take this to market." Julia felt sick. "And Elaine, your first wife? Was she part of your test group too?" Connor's expression flickered. "Elaine was less compatible. There were complications we didn't anticipate." "She died," Julia whispered, "because of your breakthrough drug." "She died advancing medical science," Connor corrected. "A noble sacrifice." Julia cradled her stomach protectively. "I won't let you use our baby as a lab rat." "You don't have a choice," Connor replied. "You're 5 months pregnant, with no money of your own, no phone, no transportation. Your former colleagues think you've embraced the life of a socialite. Your mother has been effectively cut out of the picture." He stroked her cheek with false tenderness. "You're exactly where you need to be, Julia, under my care, taking your medicine, ensuring our child develops according to Wilson standards." As he left the room, Connor paused at the door. "By the way, effective immediately, you won't be attending any more public functions. Mother agrees it's best to keep you close to home during this critical phase. For your own protection, of course." The door closed, and Julia heard the distinctive click of a lock engaging from the outside. She was no longer just living in a golden cage. She was a prisoner. That night, alone in her locked bedroom, Julia curled around her growing belly, whispering promises to her unborn child. "I'll get us out of here," she vowed. "Somehow, your grandmother will help us. She always finds a way." Julia closed her eyes, picturing the blue house, not a real place, but an imaginary safe haven she and Martha had created when Julia was 7, after her father left. Whenever she'd felt scared or sad, Martha would say, "Let's go to the blue house by the lake in our minds. Nothing bad can happen there. It's just for us." It had been their secret code, their special place. If Martha received the locket with that message, she would understand. Julia was calling for help, reaching across the walls of her prison to the one person who had never failed her. "Hold on, little one," Julia whispered to her baby. "Grandma Martha is coming." Martha sat in her small kitchen, turning the silver locket over in her hands. When Alexis had delivered it along with Julia's message, the blue house. Remember, Martha had felt simultaneous dread and relief. Dread because the situation must be dire for Julia to risk sending such a message. Relief because her daughter was finally asking for help. "The blue house," Martha whispered, memories flooding back. It had started the night Julia broke down, 3 months after Frank left. Martha had found her 7-year-old daughter hiding in her closet, sobbing uncontrollably. "I dreamed Daddy came back," Julia had hiccuped through tears. "But when I ran to hug him, he kept walking away. I couldn't catch him." Martha had lifted her small daughter into her lap, rocking her gently. "I know it hurts, sweetheart. Why doesn't he love us anymore?" Julia had asked, the simple question like a knife to Martha's heart. Unable to explain adult complexities like depression and abandonment to a child, Martha had created a story instead. "Close your eyes," she'd instructed. "Imagine a pretty blue house by a lake, with white shutters and a red door. Can you see it?" Julia had nodded, eyes still closed. "That's our special place," Martha had continued. "In that house, we're always safe. No one can hurt us there. When you feel sad or scared, you can go to the blue house in your mind, and I'll meet you there. It will always be just for us." Over the years, the blue house had become their sanctuary. During thunderstorms that frightened young Julia, during teenage heartbreaks, before college exams that caused anxiety, "I'll meet you at the blue house," was Martha's way of saying, "I'm with you through this. You're not alone." Now, decades later, Julia was calling her to the blue house again. But this time, the threat was real, the danger immediate. Martha had been preparing for this moment. Since her visit to the Wilson mansion months ago, when Julia had slipped her the note about the pills, Martha had been gathering information. Working with Detective Angela Rivera, she'd built a case file on Wilson Pharmaceuticals. The company has had 3 whistleblower complaints in the past 5 years, Angela had told her. All settled quietly with massive payouts and ironclad NDAs. Whatever they're hiding, they're willing to pay a fortune to keep it buried. Martha had dug deeper. using skills honed from years of working unseen in corporate buildings. Cleaning staff were invisible to executives, which meant Martha had overheard countless confidential conversations while emptying trash bins and vacuuming offices. She'd applied those same observation skills to the Wilsons. Using public records, Martha discovered that Connor's first wife, Elaine, had indeed died during childbirth, officially from a rare amniotic fluid embolism. But the death certificate had been signed by Dr. Gregory Evans, Wilson Pharmaceuticals' chief medical researcher, the same doctor now overseeing Julia's pregnancy. Martha had also learned about Wilson Pharmaceuticals' major initiative, Project Genesis, a prenatal supplement they claimed would revolutionize fetal development. The FDA had repeatedly delayed approval, citing concerns about trial methodologies and data transparency. Most disturbing of all, Martha had uncovered a pattern of reproductive endocrinologists referring specific patients to Wilson Pharmaceuticals' exclusive prenatal program. The common factor? All the women, including Julia, shared rare genetic markers that made them ideal test subjects for the Genesis compound. Now, with Julia's plea for help in hand, Martha knew it was time to act. She called Angela immediately. "She's sending a distress signal," Martha explained. "We need to get her out of there." "Martha, we still don't have enough for a warrant," Angela cautioned. "The Wilsons have judges and police chiefs in their pocket. If we move officially without ironclad evidence, they'll bury the case before it starts." "Then we don't move officially," Martha replied, a plan already forming. Julia mentioned once that the Wilsons host an annual charity gala for the Children's Hospital at their estate. Everyone who's anyone attends. Angela caught on quickly. "Perfect cover to get inside. When is it?" "Next Saturday. And I'm going to need your help." Over the next week, Martha and Angela prepared meticulously. Through one of Julia's former marketing colleagues, they learned that the catering company was desperately short-staffed for the Wilsons' gala. Angela pulled strings to get Martha added to the catering team, using a false name and background check that would pass cursory scrutiny. "But if anyone recognizes you," Angela started. "They won't," Martha assured her, holding up a gray wig and glasses. "I've spent my life being invisible when I needed to be." The night of the gala, Martha stood in Angela's apartment, preparing for the most important role of her life. The detective helped her secure the wig and showed her how to use the small communications device they'd be using to stay in contact. "Everything's in place," Angela confirmed. "I have a team of 3 federal agents who owe me favors positioned as guests. They'll create a diversion if needed. Dr. Lang, the OBGYN I trust, is on standby. The safe house is ready." Martha nodded, her heart pounding. The plan depended on precise timing and a lot of luck. If Connor or Faith recognized her, if Julia wasn't able to move quickly enough in her condition, if security was heavier than anticipated, any number of things could go wrong. "Are you sure you want to do this yourself?" Angela asked gently. "I could send in one of my people." Martha shook her head firmly. "It has to be me. Julia will be scared, vulnerable. She needs to see a face she trusts completely." 3 hours later, Martha was inside the Wilson mansion, dressed in a black server's uniform, her gray wig and glasses transforming her appearance enough to move unnoticed among the wealthy guests. The estate was even more opulent than she'd imagined. Crystal chandeliers, priceless artwork, furniture that probably cost more than her entire house. But Martha wasn't there to gawk. While serving champagne, she scanned the crowd continuously, searching for Julia. Her daughter was nowhere to be seen, despite being the wife of the host. After an hour, Martha spotted Faith Wilson holding court with a group of socialites. Keeping her head down, Martha maneuvered close enough to overhear their conversation. "Julia sends her regrets," Faith was saying smoothly. "The pregnancy has been rather difficult. Doctor's orders, complete bed rest." One woman touched Faith's arm sympathetically. "Poor dear. Will she deliver early?" "We're monitoring the situation carefully," Faith replied with a practiced smile. "Connor has arranged for the very best care. Our own Dr. Evans is overseeing everything personally." Martha withdrew, her concern growing. She touched the communication device in her ear. "Angela, Julia's not here. She's supposedly on bed rest upstairs. Can you find a way up?" Angela's voice crackled softly. "I think so. The staff are using the service elevator in the east wing. Be careful. We can only maintain the diversion for maybe 15 minutes once we initiate." Martha waited for her moment, then slipped away from the main reception area. Using her years of experience navigating buildings as cleaning staff, she found the service areas quickly. When a maid emerged from the service elevator with an empty tray, Martha approached her confidently. "Mrs. Wilson needs fresh tea in her suite," she improvised. "They told me to bring it up right away." The maid looked skeptical. "I just came from upstairs. She didn't say anything to me." Martha leaned in conspiratorially. "Between us, I think Mr. Wilson wants to check on her. He asked for 2 cups. This seemed to satisfy the maid, who nodded toward the kitchen. "Tea service is prepared on the counter. Her suite is on the 3rd floor, end of the hall." Martha quickly assembled the tea tray and took the service elevator up. The third floor was eerily quiet compared to the bustling gala below. Martha moved silently down the hallway, passing closed doors until she reached the end, where double doors marked the master suite. She hesitated, then knocked softly. "Room service." No answer. Martha tried the handle and found it locked. She pulled out a small case of tools Angela had provided, basic lock-picking equipment. "I never thought my cleaning days would come to this," Martha muttered, carefully manipulating the lock. After several tense moments, she heard a click. The door swung open. The suite was immense and tastefully decorated in cream and gold. Martha stepped inside cautiously. "Julia?" she called softly. A rustling sound came from the bedroom beyond. Martha moved toward it, tea tray still in hand as a prop. She pushed open the bedroom door and froze. Julia was sitting on the edge of a massive four-poster bed, pale and thin despite her pregnant belly. At the sound of the door, she looked up with dull eyes that suddenly widened in recognition. "Mom?" she whispered, disbelief and hope warring on her face. Martha quickly set down the tray and rushed to her daughter, enveloping her in a gentle embrace. Julia clung to her, body shaking with silent sobs. "You came?" Julia kept repeating. "You really came." "Of course I did," Martha soothed, pulling back to examine her daughter. Julia looked exhausted and frail. Her wrists showed signs of restraints, faint bruises in circular patterns. "Can you walk? We don't have much time." Julia nodded, struggling to her feet. "They've been drugging me, keeping me sedated, but I've been hiding the pills for the last 2 days, preparing." "Smart girl," Martha said, pride mingling with fury at what her daughter had endured. She touched her earpiece. "Angela, I have her. We need the diversion now." "Copy that," Angela replied. "Diversion in 3 minutes. Get to the service elevator." Martha helped Julia toward the door, grabbing a robe to throw over her daughter's nightgown. "We need to move quickly but quietly. Can you manage?" Julia nodded again, one hand protectively cradling her belly. "The baby's been kicking. That's good, right? It means she's fighting too." "She?" Martha asked, momentarily distracted by the revelation. A ghost of a smile crossed Julia's face. "I think so. Just a feeling." They made it to the hallway without incident, Martha supporting Julia's weight as they moved toward the service elevator. They were halfway there when a door opened ahead of them, and Dr. Evans stepped out with a medical bag. He stopped short at the sight of them, confusion quickly turning to alarm. "Mrs. Wilson? What are you doing out of bed? And who is this?" Martha thought fast. "Nurse Jenkins, sir." Mrs. Wilson was feeling faint and needed air. "I'm helping her to the sitting room." Evans frowned, clearly not recognizing Martha from the medical staff. "I don't recall a Nurse Jenkins on our team." Before he could say more, a commotion erupted downstairs. Raised voices, the sound of breaking glass, alarms beginning to wail. Angela's diversion. Evans looked toward the noise, momentarily distracted. Martha seized the opportunity, shoving the tea tray into his chest with surprising force. The doctor stumbled backward, hot tea soaking his shirt as he lost his balance and fell. "Run!" Martha urged Julia, pulling her toward the elevator. They reached it just as the house security system began announcing a lockdown. The elevator doors opened, and they tumbled inside, Martha jabbing the button for the basement level. "What's happening downstairs?" Julia asked as they descended. "Your Aunt Angela creating a diversion," Martha explained. "She's been helping me investigate the Wilsons. She's brought federal agents posing as guests." Julia leaned heavily against the elevator wall, her breathing labored. "Connor, he's been using our baby for drug trials. His first wife died because of their experiments." "I know," Martha said grimly. "We've been building a case. But right now, we just need to get you safe." The elevator reached the basement, opening into a service area filled with extra tables, chairs, and supplies for the gala. Martha led Julia through a maze of storage rooms toward a service tunnel she'd identified from studying the mansion plans, an old delivery access that connected to the gardens. Almost there, Martha encouraged as they reached a heavy door at the end of the corridor. She pushed it open to reveal a dimly lit tunnel. "This leads to the garden shed. Angela is waiting with a car on the other side of the property." They had made it halfway through the tunnel when the door behind them crashed open. Connor Wilson stood there, his perfect appearance disheveled, rage contorting his handsome features. "Julia!" he shouted, his voice echoing in the confined space. "Stop right there." Martha pushed Julia behind her protectively. "Keep going," she whispered. "I'll handle him." "Both of you," Connor snarled, advancing toward them. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. That child Julia carries is the culmination of years of research." "That child is my grandchild," Martha replied, standing her ground. "And Julia is my daughter. You've kept her prisoner, experimented on her against her will." Connor's laugh was cold. "Against her will? She signed the consent forms. She married me willingly. Everything has been perfectly legal." "Coerced consent isn't legal," Martha countered. "And we have evidence of your illegal trials, the doctored data, What happened to Elaine? Something dangerous flashed in Connor's eyes. You think you can challenge the Wilson family? With what? The word of a cafeteria worker against a pharmaceutical empire? Julia stepped forward, her voice stronger than it had been in months. With my testimony, Connor, and the blood samples I've been collecting every time you forced those drugs on me, I have them hidden where even your security goons couldn't find them. Connor lunged forward suddenly, grabbing Julia's arm. You're not going anywhere with my child. Martha reacted instinctively, driving her knee up hard between Connor's legs. As he doubled over in pain, she shoved him backward with unexpected strength. Run, Julia, Martha shouted, pushing her daughter toward the tunnel exit. They burst into the garden shed and out into the cool night air, the sounds of the disrupted gala still audible from the main house. Alarms were blaring, security personnel rushing about in confusion. Through the chaos, Martha spotted Angela waving from behind a hedgerow, a nondescript car idling nearby. They were halfway across the lawn when Julia suddenly gasped, clutching her stomach as she stumbled to her knees. Julia! Martha knelt beside her. What's wrong? Julia's face contorted in pain. The baby. I think something's wrong. Angela! Martha called desperately. We need help here. Angela ran to them, quickly assessing the situation. We need to get her to the car. Now. Together, they half-carried Julia to the waiting vehicle, easing her into the back seat. Martha climbed in beside her daughter, cradling Julia's head in her lap. Hospital? Angela asked, starting the engine. Julia shook her head vehemently. No, Connor controls the local hospitals. Their doctors would alert him immediately. The safe house then, Angela decided, pulling away from the estate as security vehicles began mobilizing at the main gate. I have a doctor meeting us there. As they drove through the night, Julia's contractions intensified. It's too early, she moaned. I'm only 7 months. Martha stroked her daughter's hair. Premature babies survive, sweetheart. We'll get you help. Julia clutched Martha's hand, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for shutting you out. For the wedding. For everything. Shh, Martha soothed. None of that matters now. It does, Julia insisted between pained breaths. I chose him over you because I thought I wanted that life. The wealth. The prestige. I was so stupid. You fell in love, Martha said gently. We all make choices based on what we think is love. What matters is that you're brave enough to ask for help when you need it. Julia's grip on Martha's hand tightened as another contraction seized her. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered fearfully. Martha's voice was firm with conviction. You can. You're my daughter. You're stronger than you know. In the darkness of the car, speeding away from the golden cage that had nearly destroyed her, Julia looked up at her mother, the woman she had once been ashamed to acknowledge at her wedding, now her rescuer and rock. The blue house, Julia murmured, managing a small smile despite her pain. He remembered. Martha kissed her daughter's forehead tenderly. I told you, didn't I? I'll always meet you there. Angela's safe house was a rustic cabin on the outskirts of town, owned by her uncle and off any property records connected to her. By the time they arrived, Julia's contractions were coming every 3 minutes. Dr. Sarah Lang, an OBGYN who had been one of the first to question Wilson Pharmaceuticals' prenatal trials, was waiting for them. Get her inside quickly, Dr. Lang instructed, already setting up portable medical equipment. I've brought everything we might need for a premature delivery. They carried Julia to a bedroom that had been prepared with clean sheets and medical supplies. As Dr. Lang examined her, Julia cried out in pain, gripping Martha's hand. She's fully dilated, Dr. Lang announced. This baby is coming now. The stress of the escape must have triggered labor. Is the baby okay? Julia asked frantically. The drugs they gave me, we'll know soon, Dr. Lang said honestly. But I hear a strong heartbeat. That's a good sign. Martha positioned herself behind Julia, supporting her daughter's back as she had done for so many laboring mothers during her brief time as a midwife's assistant decades ago. That had been before Julia was born, before Frank, when Martha had dreamed of becoming a nurse herself. Life had taken her in a different direction, but the skills remained. Remember to breathe through the contractions, Martha coached, just like we practiced when you were little and had those terrible growing pains. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Julia tried to follow her mother's instructions, her face contorted with effort and pain. I can't believe you're delivering my baby, she managed between contractions. After everything, where else would I be? Martha replied simply. Outside the cabin, Angela had positioned lookouts, trusted former colleagues who owed her favors. The Wilsons had influence, but Angela had spent 20 years building a network of her own. They would have warning if Connor's security team managed to track them. As dawn approached, Julia's labor intensified. Dr. Lang monitored both mother and baby carefully, concern growing on her face. The baby's heart rate is dropping slightly with contractions, she informed them. We need to move things along. Julia, on the next contraction, I need you to push with everything you have. Julia nodded exhaustedly, her face pale and damp with sweat. When the next contraction came, she bore down with a primal cry that seemed to carry all the pain and fear of the past year. "Good," Dr. Lang encouraged. "I can see the head. One more big push." Martha held her daughter tightly. "You can do this, Julia. You're almost there." With a final, tremendous effort, Julia pushed. Seconds later, a thin, reedy cry filled the cabin as Dr. Lang lifted a tiny, perfect baby girl. "She's here," Dr. Lang announced, quickly wrapping the premature infant in a special thermal blanket. Small but fighting, she placed the tiny bundle on Julia's chest. Despite her exhaustion, Julia's arms came up instinctively to cradle her daughter. "She's so small," she whispered in awe. 5 pounds even. Dr. Lang confirmed after a quick assessment. "Excellent weight for 32 weeks. Let's get her stabilized." While Dr. Lang worked efficiently to check the newborn's vitals and ensure her breathing was regular, Martha gazed down at her daughter and granddaughter, tears flowing freely. "She's beautiful, Julia," Martha said softly. "Perfect." Julia looked up at her mother, eyes filled with gratitude and love. "I want to name her Hope," she said decisively. "Hope Martha Thomas." "Thomas?" Martha questioned. "Not Wilson?" Julia shook her head firmly. "Never Wilson. She's a Thomas like us. Strong, resilient, brave." She stroked the baby's delicate cheek. "Besides, look at that chin. That's your chin, Mom. The Thomas family chin." Martha laughed through her tears, seeing the resemblance immediately. 3 generations of Thomas women, bound by blood and love, and now by survival. Dr. Lang completed her examination, smiling reassuringly. "Preliminary assessment looks good. Her lungs are functioning well for her gestational age, and her reflexes are strong. We should get her to a proper NICU for monitoring, but she's stable for now." "Not a local hospital," Julia insisted, fear returning to her eyes. "Connor would find us." "I've arranged transport to a hospital 3 counties over," Angela said from the doorway, "under assumed names. My cousin is chief of pediatrics there. You'll be protected." As they prepared for transport, Martha helped clean and dress baby Hope in a tiny outfit Angela had thought to bring. The newborn's eyes, when they briefly opened, were alert and searching, fixing on Martha's face with an intensity that made her heart swell. "Hello, little one," Martha whispered. "I'm your grandma. Welcome to the world." Julia watched her mother with her child, a profound sense of peace washing over her despite the circumstances. "I was so wrong, Mom," she said quietly, "about everything." Martha brought Hope back to Julia's arms. "You were lost for a while, but you found your way back, because you never stopped looking for me," Julia replied, "even when I pushed you away." Their moment was interrupted by Angela's urgent return. "We need to move. Now." "My contact at the sheriff's office says Connor's filed a report claiming Julia is mentally unstable and that Martha has kidnapped her and endangered the baby." Julia clutched Hope tighter. "They'll never stop, will they?" "They will," Angela assured her. "But first we need to get you somewhere safe while we build our case." With practiced efficiency, they transferred Julia and baby Hope to a waiting ambulance, unmarked, borrowed from a private service through another of Angela's connections. Dr. Lang accompanied them, while Martha and Angela followed in a separate vehicle. "We have a safe house apartment set up 3 hours north," Angela explained as they drove. "You'll stay there under protection while we process the evidence." "What evidence do we have?" Martha asked, reality setting in now that the immediate danger had passed. Angela smiled grimly. "More than you think. While you were rescuing Julia, my team at the gala executed a warrant on Wilson Pharmaceuticals' research division, very quietly, very specifically targeted. The judge who signed it owes me for keeping his daughter's DUI out of the papers last year." "What did they find?" "Files on Connor's first wife, Elaine, doctored clinical trial data, and a list of pregnant women who were being given Genesis without their informed consent." Angela's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "The Wilsons have been running illegal human trials for years, Martha, targeting women with specific genetic markers, promising them exclusive prenatal care when they were actually test subjects." Martha thought of Julia, imprisoned in that mansion, force-fed experimental drugs. "Will it be enough? The Wilsons have powerful friends." "They do," Angela acknowledged, "but so do I, and unlike theirs, mine believe in justice." She glanced at Martha. "Plus, we have something they don't expect." "What's that?" "Julia's testimony, and the evidence she collected." Angela's expression was admiring. "Your daughter managed to save samples of every supplement they gave her, hid them in prescription vitamin bottles Connor's staff never touched, combined with her medical records from Dr. Lang. It's damning." Martha felt a surge of pride. Even trapped and afraid, Julia had fought back in her own way, gathering evidence, preparing for a moment of escape. The Thomas family resilience passed from mother to daughter. Over the following weeks, as Julia and Hope recovered in the safe apartment, the case against Wilson Pharmaceuticals began to build. A whistleblower from within the company, Dr. Evans' assistant who had witnessed Elaine's death, came forward with additional documentation. Federal investigators uncovered offshore accounts where the Wilsons had hidden millions in profits from their illegal drug trials. Connor, meanwhile, was growing increasingly desperate. He appeared on national television, claiming his wife had been kidnapped during a psychotic break brought on by pregnancy complications. "My wife and unborn child are in danger," he pleaded, looking appropriately devastated for the cameras. "Julia, if you can hear this, please come home. Let me help you and our baby." Julia watched the broadcast from the safe apartment, baby Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. "He's good, isn't he?" she remarked to Martha. "I believed that face once, that concerned, loving expression. People see what they want to see," Martha replied, gently stroking Hope's wispy hair, "until they can't anymore." 2 months after Hope's birth, the facade began to crumble. The FDA announced a formal investigation into Wilson Pharmaceuticals' prenatal supplement program. 3 days later, federal agents arrested Faith Wilson as she attempted to board a private jet to a non-extradition country. Corporate investors began distancing themselves from the company, stock prices plummeted, and the governor who had attended Julia's wedding suddenly couldn't recall his close friendship with the Wilson family. Connor remained at large, having disappeared the day of Faith's arrest. Despite Angela's protection detail, Julia lived in constant fear that he would find them and try to reclaim his property, both her and Hope. "He won't stop," Julia confided to Martha one evening as they prepared dinner in the safe apartment. "He sees Hope as the culmination of his life's work, his scientific achievement." Martha squeezed her daughter's shoulder reassuringly. "Then we'll be ready." They didn't have to wait long. 2 nights later, the apartment security system alerted them to a breach. Angela's team moved Julia and Hope to the designated panic room while Martha and Angela faced the intruder. Connor Wilson looked nothing like the polished pharmaceutical heir from the wedding. His eyes were wild, his expensive suit rumpled, his normally perfect hair disheveled. "Where are they?" he demanded, a gun trembling in his hand. "Where are my wife and child?" "Safe from you," Martha replied calmly, standing her ground despite the weapon pointed at her. "It's over, Connor. The FBI has your mother in custody. Your company is facing multiple federal investigations. Your name is being dragged through every newspaper in the country. You think I care about any of that?" Connor's laugh was unhinged. "The Genesis program is my legacy. My child is the proof of concept that will revolutionize human development. Hope is not your experiment," Martha said firmly. "She's a baby, a human being." "Hope?" Connor's face twisted. "She named my daughter. Hope?" He advanced toward Martha, gun raised. "Tell me where they are, now." Martha didn't flinch. "No." In that moment, Connor seemed to truly see Martha for the first time, not as Julia's embarrassing mother or a cafeteria worker beneath his notice, but as the formidable woman who had dismantled his empire. His expression contorted with rage. "You," he spat. "This is all your fault, the cleaning woman who thinks she can destroy a Wilson." Martha met his gaze steadily. "I'm not just a cleaning woman, I'm a mother, and you threatened my child." Before Connor could respond, the apartment door burst open. Federal agents poured in, weapons trained on Connor. Angela had triggered a silent alarm the moment he'd entered. "Connor Wilson," the lead agent announced, "you're under arrest for multiple violations of federal drug laws, kidnapping, assault, and attempted murder." As the agents handcuffed Connor, he continued to rant about Genesis, about scientific progress, about his rights to his child. Martha watched him being led away, feeling not triumph but sadness for Julia, who had once loved this man enough to shut her own mother out of her life. 6 months later, Martha stood in the backyard of a modest but comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood 2 states away from where the Wilson drama had unfolded. Julia was kneeling in a garden bed, showing 8-month-old Hope how to pat soil around a small sapling. "This is a sugar maple," Julia was explaining to her attentive daughter. "In the fall, its leaves will turn bright red and orange, and when you're bigger, we can tap it for maple syrup." Hope babbled happily, tiny hands covered in dirt as she imitated her mother's movements. Martha watched them from the porch, her heart full. They had come so far from that terrible day outside the cathedral. The Wilson case had become one of the biggest pharmaceutical scandals in decades. Faith Wilson had been sentenced to 15 years for her role in the illegal trials and the cover-up of Elaine's death. Connor was awaiting trial, having been denied bail as a flight risk. Wilson Pharmaceuticals had been sold off in pieces, its legitimate patents acquired by competitors, its research division shut down entirely. Julia had provided key testimony to federal prosecutors, then chosen to rebuild her life away from the spotlight. With help from a victims' compensation fund and Martha's savings, they had purchased this small house in a neighborhood where no one knew their story. Julia had started a support group for survivors of controlling relationships, working remotely as a marketing consultant for companies Angela carefully vetted. Martha had finally pursued her long-abandoned dream of opening a small bakery, specializing in the cookies and muffins she had once made for the school cafeteria. Local children stopped by after school for her famous snickerdoodles, often sitting at the counter to tell her about their day while they ate. It was a simple life, but a happy one. Julia looked up from the garden, catching Martha's eye with a smile. Hope wants to know if Grandma's going to help with the special tree. Martha descended the porch steps, joining them in the soft spring soil. Of course I am. This is a 3-generation project, right, Hope? Hope reached for Martha with muddy hands, smearing dirt across her grandmother's cheek as she planted a wet kiss there. Both women laughed, the sound pure and unrestrained. I have something for you, Julia said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out an envelope, handing it to Martha. I've been waiting for the right moment. Martha opened it curiously, finding legal papers inside. As she read them, tears filled her eyes. You're changing her name? She asked, voice thick with emotion. Julia nodded. Hope Martha Thomas, officially and legally. No trace of Wilson left. Martha looked from the papers to her daughter to her granddaughter, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them here. Julia, you saved us, Mom, Julia said simply. In every way a person can be saved. Hope should carry your name proudly. Martha gathered both of them into her arms, holding her family close. 3 generations of Thomas women, planting roots together, both the maple sapling in their garden and the bonds between them that no force could ever sever again. As they patted the last of the soil around the tree's base, Julia asked softly, Do you remember what you told me the day Hope was born? About walking away silently? Martha nodded. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away silently, she recited. But the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. I think about that every day, Julia said, watching Hope toddle across the grass after a butterfly. How different things might have been if I'd been brave enough to ask for help sooner. You asked when it mattered most, Martha reminded her. When Hope's future was at stake, Julia reached for her mother's hand, both of them dirt, stained and sturdy. I've been thinking about the Blue House lately. Our imaginary safe place? Martha smiled at the memory. Not so imaginary anymore, Julia said, gesturing to their home with its blue siding and white trim. I think we finally found it, Mom. Our blue house by the lake. Martha looked at their small home, at the reflecting pond visible just beyond the garden fence, at her daughter and granddaughter bathed in afternoon sunlight. After a lifetime of sacrifice and struggle, of loss and betrayal, of silent resilience and brave new beginnings, they had indeed found their blue house. They had found their way home. This story reminds us that family bonds can endure even the most difficult challenges. Martha's unwavering love for her daughter teaches us that sometimes, waiting patiently and being ready when needed is the greatest gift we can give those we love. Did this story touch your heart? Share it with someone who might need to hear its message of hope and redemption. And if you have a family story of reunion or redemption, we'd love to hear it in the comments below. As the sun set behind their blue house, Martha, Julia, and little Hope continued tending their garden, planting not just trees and flowers, but new memories to replace the painful ones. The maple sapling might take years to grow tall and strong, but they had time now. Time to watch Hope take her first steps across the lawn. Time for Julia to heal and rediscover her voice. Time for Martha to simply be the mother and grandmother she'd always wanted to be. The Blue House wasn't just a home, it was the embodiment of Martha's silent promise made outside that cathedral. I'll always be waiting when you need me. A promise kept through years of separation, through betrayal and danger, through birth and renewal. Some bonds can never be broken, no matter how hard others try to sever them. The love between a mother and daughter may bend and stretch, but in the Thomas family, it proved stronger than wealth, stronger than control, stronger even than fear itself.